Alright, Mastering Solidworks, Chapter 20, Modeling in Context. This chapter provides information you need to make informed decisions about whether or not to use how to use powerful tools, and context modeling is a topic worthy of some investigation before combining production data with external references. Almost anything you can do with in-context modeling can also be done another way, but in context, the traditional way you view the geometry is one part driven with another. Drives another. In context modeling extends the parametric design of individual parts of the top level. The assembly of the power comes from the potential unexpected results. If you're not careful, in context modeling can lead to difficulty to file management, loss of control over changes. In this chapter, we will learn to understand external references, sketches, and features, evaluate in context modeling pros and cons, understand inserted, split, and mirror parts. Understanding in-context modeling. In-context modeling, known as top-down or in-place modeling, the technique is used to create the relationship between parts of the context with the assembly in which the geometry one of the parts is controlled by other part, and the mate's position relative to the one of another. In contrast, bottom-up modeling involves making parts in their own individual windows, assembling the finished parts into assembly with mates. In the simplest form, in-context modeling sketches one part in an assembly that is related to the edge of another part in an assembly. The relationship specifically to the particular with the assembly is relevant only to the in-context of the assembly. For example, you may create a box, but put into assembly must create the lid of the part parametrically linked to the size and shape of the box. You create a lid part with the context assembling such that the lid always matches the box regardless of the box changes. Sketch relation dimension feature for the condition of the lid can reference to the box. In context relationship is also known as the external relationship, where one relationship is something external with itself. When the box changes the lid itself, lid also changes if the assembly of both parts are open. This arrangement creates another type of parent-child relationship where the box and the parent is driven, and the lid of the child is driven with the assembly. Is in context. You can see getting used to the terminology will be one of the first hurdles as beginning to use techniques. You will understand what relationship metaphors make sense. The assembly maintains a record of each of the context reference of the box change with both the assembly and the top open. The top updates for the box is changed without the assembly being open. The lid will update until the assembly is open. The recorder of the reference assembly maintains is held with what is called a update holder. SolidWorks has arranged things such as the update holder is all but forgotten and difficult to find. When one update holder is created for every sketch feature that contains the reference for the other entities within that particular assembly. To show up the update holders, right-click on the top level assembly name in the feature manager, show update holders. Working through simple in-context examples. Rather than continuing to discuss the topic theoretically, I demonstrate some of the context and modeling situations, starting with a simple rectangular block. This example starts with a simple rectangular block must have the option to go into the in-context part with the assembly, but this example demonstrates just one. Following steps are general, but because you should already be familiar with the basic assembly part modeling. Starting a new assembly. Opening the new assembly using the template with your choice of the modeling in context is especially important with the parts in assembly. You the same unit of the units. The assembly units are different from part units. You edit the part with the context assembly when you may be presented with one type of the unit while editing the part in assembly. Another type of the unit will be editing the part in its own window. The next step is to save the assembly. SolidWorks don't force you to save it before adding the part, but it's a good idea to save the assembly and any final actually after creating it. Caution: SolidWorks help says virtual components are particularly useful while in context modeling, but this may be true, but there are more stories. It creates a part in context for the assembly that has not been yet saved. You may lose all references when you save the assembly. To be safe, avoid creating an in context relation unsaved assembly. What more can you fall into multiple contexts trapped with the original unsaved assembly? The new saved assembly represents the separate contexts in which you have created the feature. Working with a multiple context requires special setting, the use of which should be reserved for the special situation where you know what you're doing, why. In other words, you don't create multiple contexts. It's a very bad idea. With virtual parts, SolidWorks has allowed easy use to operation, create a nightmare scenario that sets over the unwary for disaster and frustration. At minimum, is overstated. I don't think so. Just like the toolbox file management, virtual parts in context are areas that need to be explored using throwaway data with an experienced guide before you can ready to risk production data. Alright, the arrowhead and a green check mark. Insert a new part with a new assembly. Choose Insert Component. Check Component New Part. Select with the toolbar icon New Part with the Insert Component Flyout toolbar. After clicking the New Part command, SolidWorks will add the new part to the feature manager of the new assembly. No default name convention shown. Figure 21. Also note with a cursor with a green check mark on it, with the check mark tells you with the conjunction with the text with the message bar over the bottom of the screen. Then you need to select the plane of your face place the front or first X and Y plane on the front plane assembly. With remember, every part may have the standard planes renamed to anything you choose, as though the first standard plane may not be called the front plane. When you click the cursor with the green mark on a plane with the plane of your face, with the front plane with the part becomes the fixed and front plane assembly the origin. For the two first aligned with Solidworks automatically opens with a new sketch front plane over the part with the part also turns blue. With the color means that the editing part of the context of the assembly, whether to do this with state change of the part of the document rather than assembly document. New sketch, for example, is added to the part rather than assemblies. Tip: if you simply click an empty area on the screen instead of selecting the plane or face, the new part will be fixed. With its origin, major planes sharing an origin of the plane's assemblies. It's a great way to ensure that all the new parts share the same origin. This way they don't need mates and having to manage dangerous in-place mates. Introducing virtual components. Parts that you have just added to the new assembly is called virtual components. Called virtual because the part is not yet saved, but it's still yes inside of the assembly. The Y name will appear that's shown in Figure 21. When you save the part to the external file, it loses part of the name associated with the current assembly of the components. Part of the name means that both of the parts and some of the assemblies can be virtual. They can exist only on the top level of the assembly. You will find more information on virtual components later in this chapter. Note: a virtual component cannot have a drawing. If you have saved the part of the external file with the default Solidworks has options for the wood find the tools option assembly save new components to external files. Without settings, you will get the remainder saved virtual parts external to the assembly. The next time you save the assembly, unless you've clicked on don't show it again option, the reminder, you can get reminder back by going to tools option message error of the warnings, deleting it from the list. You have the difficulty to keep track of all these options. Solidworks search bar allows you to search options, and also use the search bar inside of the tools option dialog box. Creating the part geometry. Sketch the center of the rectangle with the origin. Give the dimension 4 inches by 5 inches wide with extrude with 2 inch. You can find the extrude command icon with the assembly toolbar, editing part of the context in assembly. Now exit the part. Do this with the edit component icon. One of the part places where it shows up on screen. Figure 20, 22 show the confirmation corner of the upper right corner of the graphics window. You can also find the assembly toolbar. Understanding it in context, you have to be really careful about what you're doing in this context. Assembly, for example, you sketch the rectangular in context. Did you make references and when the outside of the part? Of course not. How did you do? There's nothing outside of the part that are sure about with the telltale sign with the context relation with the arrow sign. Arrow after sketch a feature of the part with the feature manager of the looks to see what the symbol will look like after the sketch. You would probably do with it if you have the context symbol to have it saved. Your assembly you prime default with the multiple context trap mentioned earlier. Here's how the first center point of the rectangular probably reinforced with the assembly original after the part orientation qualifies external reference, therefore is given an arrow symbol. You could give it another one sketch of the one assembly instead of the part plane. I told you that you have to be careful in these assemblies to see the relation more detail while editing assembly. Not the part. Right click top of level assembly name featured manager, select show update holders. Figure 20 shows the update holder of the bottom of the new assembly tray along with the arrow symbol after the sketch. So there's your update holder. You've created a situation easy enough to repair for the edit, sketch, delete, narration, with the sketch point with the sign, assembly, origin, recreate with the part, origin, hint with the select of the items of the feature manager from the select other dialog. When you're unsure about the cursor, select the multiple items stack on top of one another, save with the virtual component. Next, right click on the name of the part just added with the select save the part within the external file with the shown figure 24. Give the part with the name box. Slowly double click with the default name of the shape of this dialog box to appear with shape of your document by clicking the specify path button and the saved as dialog box. Another place is where it's easy to find the delete later. The part is just for practice in this chapter. 720 shows save the virtual component external file. Note in the name of the part of the assembly feature manager has changed the name no longer surrounded with the bracket informed in the assembly name. Creating an in-context part, creating another part in the assembly, you the first part of the drive of this one, you must again click with the new power icon. When you see the cursor on the green marker, click the 5x4 end face created with the extruded features. When you do though, the first part you created turns transparent, helps you to identify the part being worked on. Non-transparent part is current. You can find the setting control of the behavior of the tools option colors toward the bottom of the page. Setting called use as specified colors when editing parts in assembly. You can find relating settings in the tools options display under heading assembly transparency for and context edit. Drop down list of 3 options: opaque, assembly, maintain, assemble transparency, force assemble transparency. Default for is force assembly transparency. The options are shown in figure 25. Assembling assembly transparency and system options display. Systems options, display. To create a sketch of the first feature for the in-context part claim, click the same pages that just click the place for the second part of the offset and either make a sketch loop with the offset with a 1/4 of an inch on the outside. To contrast the method of the selection after you do the face selection of the offset of the outside, right click with the edge of the face for the box part, select the loop of the menu, select the yellow arrow, the indicated side of the offset will be created. You use the offset entities for the sketch line, select the loop edges toward the inside end, again 1/4 inch, and then figure 20 show the rest of the offset. With a single sketch containing a nested loop, you have the extrude feature for the 1/2 inch or 10 millimeters. When complete with the confirmation corner, again to exit the part, but you should now have an assembly that does not save the part, save with the name box second part. This is just virtual component. After exiting the component, you should have also see the 2 parts same color. Click the face for the newly created part. Click on Appearance drop-down menu, select the indicated part with the figure 27 to show the cursor pointing in the indicator. Change the part color using Panel Appearance Property Manager. Do not change the entire appearance, just the color. Another thing notice about the creation of the in-context part of the Solidworks add with an in-place mates full of the lock of the new part play for the motion can call for the context feature to move unexpectedly so the part within context feature usually recommended lock down one way or another. This is one way the Solidworks is looking out for you in context scheme. Figure 28 shows the placemates and update holders. In-place mates, there they are. Edit driving part or of an in-context reference. Now comes the tricky part, going over the chain for the overall shape of the box part. Observe the effect of the virtual component. In order to do this, click the sketch under the extrude feature box part with the edit sketch for the popular pop-up toolbar. Notice that there is a difference between save as of the menu save button with the title bar of the toolbar. Save that allows you to save the assembly file, while save command enables you to save both the assembly and virtual component. After this is complete, you will be ready to edit the sketch extrude the feature for the box part with the necessary with the expand on the box and feature manager. Clicking on the plus sign to the left of the name with the clicking on the plus sign with the next to the extrude feature. Now you can click the sketch and edit the sketch from the pop-up list. With the editing sketch box, right click on the one over the rectangular, select the choose select chain. With all 4 lines selected, click the construction geometry toggle with the property band to turn all lines in the rectangular construction lines. Next, draw a circle concentric with the origin circumference on one corner of the rectangle. The sketch now looks like figure 29. After you make changes, exit the sketch with the in-context reference won't update, but the next step of the part will return to the assembly. Just go to the prepared what do you expect to see. Remember the one step of the reference edge is the reference by selecting the other step of the reference and selecting edges. When you leave edit part mode and return edit to the assembly mode, you'll find the outer line edge of the circle will become the face of the selective circle instead of the rectangular edges. Select with the cell. Rectangle display a warning symbol. This is because the edges reference to the lines no longer zipped. However, if the cursor over the one in the arrow shown figure 2010. The message warning you unable to set one or more sketch and it will appear to avoid the error with the use of the sum technique to select the inner lines, outer lines, just the outer lines making a thin feature. Responding to warnings when they occur. Go ahead and fix the error editing with the sketch of the virtual part. Box lid dealing with the lines causing the problem to remake the offset with the sketch for the selected face offset for the sketch relations cannot be repaired with the edit in the way you need to the repair with the existing relations. In general, you should avoid deleting as an editing technique, but there's no other way in the Solidworks to repair this kind of issue. The demonstration points some of the strengths, the weaknesses of the in-context modeling, not all of them. The rest of the chapter will help you give a better idea how to evaluate the technique yourself. Weighing the advantage of in-context modeling. Advantage of the in-context modeling. Obviously, for the in-context modeling is just the extension of the parametric techniques to include the part of the context of it as an assembly. Making change of one part with the heavily related with the parts update offers undisputable advantage. When works correctly, all the parts in the assembly can update with a single change. Change propagate all the way through the part drawing. Some of the users approach modeling haphazardly, or if it works and good enough. For some of them, the type of the works, the acceptable really may be good enough. For example, usually Solidworks when you create something that will never be changed. You're working on the initial concept of the model that will be given to the others. On the other hand, users who need to build models will be reused, frequently changed, but often given to other users to much approach for the decision making during the modeling. If they have been playing chess, each decision has a consequence. You rarely know the exact how things are going to turn out, but you need to prepare the most likely contingencies, assessing potential risk along the way. Anticipating problems in context modeling. Overall concept of the in-context model with a great idea of problems occur with a particular application technique of management resolved through the changes. In particular, the biggest problems seem to arise with the in-context techniques are combined with others techniques. You must be very careful of the things of the file management, assembly motion, multiple instances of parts in the assembly configuration related to issues when context references exist in your assembly. Major potential problems include lost reference due to the renamed parts in assembly, convoluted multiple references causing long build rebuild time, circular self-referring references causing change with each rebuild, external references causing conflicts with motion, serious defects between in-context techniques and configuration. Frustrated users who don't understand how to manage change of references and context scheme. Alright, for users to prefer model items drawings in context techniques, often some of the challenges with model items are either unavailable, limited, available. The feature for the creative within context because you have the covered any with a copy of the edge, one part with the other. No dimensions have been used. None will be show up the inserted models itself. Items in context model would show up when you set the edge of the dimension sketch elements to in context edge aside of these. The only model of the item drawings you can create or assembly drawing. For this reason, majority dimensions of the drawings are driven in dimensions. Identifying alternative in-context modeling. One of the most frequent problems in context modeling is related with the file management. Inexperienced users may move the rename of the file or the folder over the window in Windows Explorer, unknowing the break links that they may try to use the in-context part with some of the other than wherever the in-context relation was created. As a result, there may not be any changes that want to make the changes may happen where they do want them. Sometimes these problems result in users simply not understanding what to expect from the tool. Sometimes because the tool is capable of doing what they want. Right, wrong. Many users have developed a irrational fear of the reference of the control part from the outside of the part. In context modeling itself is a bad technique, but sometimes it's not. And best option depending on a particular situation. You need to understand the in context and all related techniques first before passing judgment on any techniques. It's always important to identify the alternative techniques, but one tool never solves all possible problems. In context modeling is powerful, but in some situations, other techniques are more appropriate. The following sections include copy techniques that share the in context ability to control individual parts, centralized location, achieve the ways of the somewhat different in assembly layout modeling, multi-body modeling. Assembly layout modeling enables you to control individual parts of the other parts at the assembly level. Sketch multi-body modeling enables you to control several parts from a single part without worrying about the file management issues having another assembly as a middle agent. Using assembly layout modeling. Assembly layouts are the powerful you can remove the watch when some people object in context modeling. Relationship within the technique of the control of the top level sketches where single sketch with multiple sketches can control most of the features, all of the part of the relationship between the part sketch with features and assembly features or sketches. This still creates external reference of the required with external assembly update of the relationship, but it's not a direct link between the different parts of the context. Assembly layouts do not lend themselves well to dynamically assemble the motion, but they are great if you want to have single location drive of the entire assembly. Assembly layouts come in the two types: the generic layout with simply dummy the sketches in the assembly and the formal layout feature, which is essentially 3D sketch and assembly. Some special property layout features described in more detail in this chapter. Assembly layout sketches are covered in more detail. Chapter 3, working with sketches of reference geometry. Using multi-body modeling. Multi-body modeling, like context modeling, is a powerful technique with the strength with the weakness of the model. Something later will separate parts together in single part can avoid the in-context modeling altogether. You should not replace assemblies with multi-body modeling. Number of the reasons, some of the limitations of multi-body techniques for common assembly operations, such as the dynamic assembly motion and its interference detection. Using judiciously a multi-body model can help you save them time making models holding up well to changes. Master model techniques are discussed later in Chapter 33, employing master model techniques. Dealing with practical details of in-context modeling. Figure 2011 shows the symbol to box sketch, symbol to top for the box, noting that the feature manager, two parts of the list in the top of the and the base, 50 thousandths of an inch offset, creating a sketch of the top part of the drive and the edge of the base part. Simply assemble to demonstrate in context process selection that follow. Understanding in-context process. You can perform the in-context modeling with the use of the two basic scheme that you can build with the part at the very beginning with the context assembly, use the insert component, new part, menu option. Or you can start with using the bottom techniques, creating a part in a separate part window, adding them to the assembly, then adding additional in-context features later. Alright, the part with a little star on it. Starting in context. Start a new part with the context assembly. First, assume the assembly contained with another part. Create a new part with the blank assembly isn't very interesting. For example, using assembly shown in figure 2011 to create the new part, show the insert component of the new part. This command is available through the toolbar button, but shown on the left, so you can play for the assembly toolbar. As this point, Solidworks prompts you to select the face and plane to locate with the new part. When you select the face or plane to the plane place, the Solidworks place with the front plane of the new part. Open the new sketches, adds on in place mate to the assembly. In context part, start the virtual part saved inside the assembly. You can choose to save them external internal parts for the next time you save the assembly. Virtual part functionality we will discuss later in this chapter. Then the pencil on a gray plane. In place mate, the place of the Solidworks automatically as the part is created with an in context is called the in place mate. That works like a fixed option, although it's actually the mate that lists where the other mates may be deleted but not edited. In place mates clamps part down to any face plane where it is applied. It means to prevent in context part moving. Later in this chapter you will learn why it's so important with the context not to move. Alright, alternative technique. Instead of using insert component new part command, you can simply create the blank part open in its own window, saving the desired location, insert the blank part with the assembly mate with the origins coincident. You can be edit with the part with the in context, same with if you create with the in context from the beginning. The only difference between the parts developed and the way that the parts created with the context and the in place mate, and the fact that the in context parts start with the virtual part while existing parts do not. In places cannot edit and is not related to the other geometry usual sense. Many users feel secure with the real mates for the real geometry, which they can identify and change as necessary. Alright, valid relations. Sketch of vertices, edges, faces, other parts of the assembly can be referred to with the in context part was the same part of the sketch, most common in relation with the concentric holes and coincident hole centers and converted etnies. On edge relation, make line edge between the parts of the offset sketch relation with the also if use. Other types of valid in-context relations include in-context sketch planes, edge conditions, extruded features such as up to face, up to body. Beyond that, you can copy surfaces from one part of the surface and offset surface feature. Working in context. When working in context, use the in-context data. Visual clues you offer information about the part which you're working on. The following topics will understand what is going on while you're working in context. Text color. When working in context, feature man with the text of the part you're working in turns blue. You should make the two things immediately obvious. First thing, you're working in context. Second part, which where is being edited. Part color and transparency. The control of the color transparency behavior of the assembly where the part is being edited within context. Choosing tools option color pages. Figure 2012 show the detail of this page. Option on the bottom of the dialog box determine the color specified with the list at the top. You've ignored parts of the same color that would be not using in context techniques. So if we went to system options, colors, color schemes, background, icon color, whatever, edit assembly part. Tool option, display section, assembly transparent for the context, saving the control transparent part not edited for the figure 25, show the setting, forcing the mod, edited the part to become the transparent, helps to keep focused on the part you're editing in the assembly. Their option for the assembly transparency for the context for the edit drop-down list, opaque assembly, also part of the not edited for the assembly component being edited within context for the turn opaque, even if they otherwise transparent. Maintain assembly transparency option leaves all assembly components in their default transparency state. Force assembly transparency option forces all the parts except for the one being edited within assembly to become transparent, but the options reflect the personal preference more than anything else does, but useful to have the remainder whether the part is being edited with the assembly document is being edited in its own window. Tip the color selected in the box shown in figure 1012 controls both the text color and the color of the part shown in the graphics window. Alright, now we have the unshaded with a assembly picture with only the edit component. Use the edit with a pencil. Use the edit component in three ways. First, after you've created the part in context, edit component to press reminds you that you're editing a part rather than editing an assembly. Along with the part color and transparency display, it is important to feedback because of the assembly function with the mates explode view the other not available with the editing part. Secondly, you can do the edit component begin with the finished editing part that's already in the assembly, editing the part with the context of the assembly title bar. of SolidWorks window reflects the fact that editing of the part assembly toolbar change with the part editing toolbar low right corner of the task bar display with the words editing part shown figure 1020 through 13. Third confirmation corner image exit with the upper right corner of the graphic window with the editing part with the context assembly, but to make it easier to leave the edit component mode. Edit component can also mean editing subassembly context for top level assembly created with the in context feature assembly features mates. If necessary, however, it will they'll do that far less so frequently editing parts in context. Alright, no, creating context relations is not one of the reasons to edit the parts of the assembly in the context with the top level assembly. Sometimes it's simply more convenient to do normal editing when you're at a top level assembly. This way is you can see how the part relates to the other parts of making the change of the assembly with making the relation between the parts. Editing some of the assembly content for the upper level assembly is often useful as well to see how the change of some of the assembly mates affect the top level. Figure 23 show the indicators of the part in context. Probably the most common mistake they make with the in-context editing is to do with the editing of the part versus editing the assembly when you add the sketch. You intended to add the sketch for each of the part of the content of the assembly, but you fail to switch to the edit part mode before creating the sketch. The sketch ends up with the assembly rather than a part. You can do limited things with a sketch in an assembly. Likewise, you've intended to make an assembly layout sketch. You do not want to switch out of the edit part mode, and you end up with the sketch part in the sketch part, and then you can't do what you wanted it to do. Fortunately, SolidWorks has added a remedy for the first situation. When you make a sketch in an assembly but you need to work on a feature in the part, you can choose the propagate feature to the part option in the feature scope area property manager for features shown in figure 2014. Notice the image on the right side of the last sketch appears derived of the mains of the sketch features are still driven in assembly, but they have been propagated to part enough to allow the feature to be edited in part. You may not want to get this route just because you've made the mistake. Similar to do this, move the sketch to the part, but the valid option in some situation. Interestingly, the feature cannot be deleted from the part unless the right mouse button feature in the part and select the make independent. You must delete it from the assembly. Our figure 2014 shows propagating assembly. It shows the cut, extrude, sketch, direction, angle, direction, diameter, loft, flip outside, draft outward, direction, thin, feature selected, feature scope. External reference symbols. After you've already discussed external reference symbols, the arrow there for variation symbols of that they mentioned. External references are four states shown in their in context arrow with out of context, arrow with question mark, lock context, arrow with asterisk, and broken reference arrow with X. In context, symbol signifies the relation created with the two parts within the current assembly resolve. Fully solved with the resolve of the both parts involved with the relationship of the assembly with the relationship created with the open and available. Out of context means with the document usually, but not necessarily for the assembly. The reference was created with the document open, and any time they may open the document, the reference was created with clicking the right mouse button and then selecting edit and context option from the menu. Edit context option either parent with the part with the insert of the part of some of the reference created with the in context reference. When you open the reference document, out of context symbol changes the in context symbol to lock reference. You can lock in external reference of the model changes it even if the parent document changes the other feature of the part may be changed, but external reference within the part remains the way until the reference is unlocked. Remove the pop base example I mentioned earlier. The spinning of the bottom part is change of the external ref at the top. Let's lock the top no longer fits the bottom. One of the bonus things of the lock references that you can unlock them. They also are flexible, gives you the control over the updates and place parts to lock references. Broken reference is another source of controversy. Some of the users believe that it makes in-context reference best way to respond to them and to break them immediately. However, one could argue that using break references function is never a good thing to do. You should remove the reference editing the feature of the sketch or change it to make it useful. The problem with broken references is the absolutely no advantage of the lock reference. For example, the lock reference can be at least unlocked. Broken references can be repaired and cannot be repaired. The only thing that you can do with broken reference is use display delete relations or to edit the features menu to completely remove the external reference. Note some users employ break references when they want to push a feature of the parent parts into the children parts, but this is limited case though employed mostly mirrored parts. This exists option, tool option, eliminated the X for the broken external reference. This does actually remove the reference, just remove the marker. Reassigns the sort of reference, so you would still have the edit reference remove the broken portion. This is just another example of where ease of use, or in this case laziness, triumphs on information, especially where the information is actually bad news. Avoid breaking reference, lazy, sloppy, bad practice. Instead, edit the reference and remove it completely. External reference, symbol of referenzations. See the left, right, on the bottom on the boss extrude. You see those. Alright, double question mark, frozen reference. Freezing technique is not necessarily intended with external reference. It can be used on them. Freezing is a feature including external reference. If the yellow freezer bar, top of the feature manager, pull that down in the tree. Works just like a rollback bar. Instead, undoing features temporarily. It freezes their parametrics. So the portion of the tree at the top where they put the freeze bar acts like an imported data until thawed by rolling the freezer bar back over the tree. Best practice, avoid placing yourself in a situation where you the broken reference parametric relations should be chained with the driven geometry does not change. You can select lock or break external relation. For example, the external relation for the converts can be locked, broken. None of them can be locked or broken. If you need to display relations selective, you should consider suppressing feature sketch relation in conditions or sketch planes. Alright, list of external reference. You can access lock broken references through the list of external references. Option right mouse button menu feature of the external reference. Symbol of figure 2016 show the name of the path assembly where the external references were created, as well as part names and etny types. Alright, the chain with a no sign on. No external reference to access. No external reference button. Assembly tool. Choose tools options. External references do not create reference external to the model from this menu. As the name suggests, it prevents external relation from being created between the parts in an assembly where offset on-text edges you convert etnies resulting in sketch etnies are created without relation with any type. Lack of reference is included in place mate, which is not created when a part is created in context. As a result, when you add the part of the assembly, if you exit later and enter editing part mode, Solidworks reminds you that the part is not fixed in space and display the warning shown in figure 2017. This message should remind you that in-context features should be used only on parts that are fully positioned in assembly. External reference settings and tools and options. Tools option, external reference pane, setting controls aspect of the behavior of the external reference. One of these options, the new external references discussed earlier. The other option, multiple context, discussed next section. In this plane, the tools option dialog box shown in 2018. Managing reference. Solidworks offers several ways to handle missing and broken references. Break all external references in assembly. Activate the tool. Right click at the top level of the assembly. Name of the feature manager. Selecting list of the external references. Choosing break all, lock all. You can also access the tool and individually assembly component. The new functionality of 2018 is that you can do this at the top level. Previously, you could do it only with the individual components. Hide broken reference indicators through the setting of the tool option external reference show X in the feature tree with the broken external references. The option is not recommending something wrong. You need to know it and ignore it, or not ignore it. If the open dialog box when you open the assembly, select the reference button. See with the part of the sub-assembly reference and assembly. Looking at in-context best practice technique requires a fair amount of discipline, restraint, foresight, judgment. Potential problems associated with overuse, misuse of the context techniques primarily include performance problems, speed loss, reference due to the final management issues. Users may also experience problems. The feature sketch for the chain with each rebuild following the sketch section contains best practice suggestions that can help you avoid these situations. Working with multiple contexts occurs when the part references the created with multiple assemblies. By default, multiple contexts are prevented from happening. If you play for the part, it has already been external reference. Different assembly warning appears in shown figure 2019. Although Solidworks displays many warnings of the multiple contexts, you still run into the situation when you need to use them. For example, you may have the sub-assembly where the parts of the top plate stand with the heads and context references. Locate the set of mounting holes for the legs of the stand. You place the sub-assembly in the top level assembly, mount another assembly with the top plate, another set of in-context holes related with the top plate. 2020 show the first table of points of the update. Hold with the large bracket appear with the machine mounted Top plate, tabletop, use the model, more in context relation, examine the external reference dialog. Top 2 in context feature, tabletop. Notice for the assembly field for the external reference dialog box is different. You can achieve this only by selecting allowable multiple context parts when editing the assembly option figure in 2018. Note the tools option setting of the multiple context system option means that this option is either on or off every document in a single machine. When it can assembly used on another machine option may be off. 2020 shows multiple contexts and shows the table. Alright, multiple context modeling should be exemptional rather than standard practice. If you do not have the assembly on the in-context reference created, you will have some out of context reference that make the troubleshooting nightmare if someone ever has to try reconstructing assemble driven. Best practice, avoid creating multiple context references. If you do this, they're very careful about naming files. Remember to turn off the multiple context option when you have finished creating reference. If you receive multiple context probably with someone else, the first thing to do is determine whether all the Scott files require to make the word. The right-click the internal reference symbol, select the edit with the context, determine the Solidworks can find the right file. But also looking at with the context symbol will tell you if any of the necessary files are not currently open outside of doing some programming. The only way to find out whether they are created multiple context probably examine the external reference list of each of the context features. This could be very time consuming. Although multiple context parts should be very rare, it is impossible to determine ahead of the part what part received the multiple context part, at least without programming. The one exemption is to some of the feature in context, some of that are out of context. Alright, using in-context configuration. On surface of mixing with the context reference configuration sound will combine the two powerful, it should offer the greater control over the models. Although this may sometimes be true, but you need to be aware of some of the effect of the combining two techniques may cause. Particularly should carefully about the configuration, particularly with the configurations or reference parts. If you use the in-context relation between two parts of the configuration, they want you to consider the few things. First, look at the door hinge part shown in figure 2021. One plate has the three configurations. Second hinge is built with the context assembly, so it will always match the first plate. Therefore, the single default configuration. The figure shows result changing first hinge pattern, part configuration, and assembly. This looks like an ideal situation because the second hinge plate always changes to the match the first hinge plate. What could be wrong with this? The problem is here that it shows only only size in the hinge plate, but that is corresponding with the configuration of the first plate to achieve the assembly. If you have the two ends in the hinge plate with the top level assembly, you would be able to show only one side of the second plane. Second situation, combining in-context reference configuration can give the trouble with the reference edge of the part with another part of the configuration reference part. Either adds or removes the fillet chamfer, then breaking the edge. Both of these situations can either in-context sketches other featured failures. This may be raised in reference to underlying sketches rather than actual model edges and faces. Some situation configurations work well with the in-context relation. Of one example would be assembly most configuration position parts. In this case, you would use configuration for the sole purpose of creating in-context relations. Using in-context with motion. Alright, you should make in-context reference between parts where they have no relative motion. The parts can move relative to the rest of the assembly, but they should remain stationary, relate relative to one another. The parts should be fully defined and show that they won't move. They would not simply assume that they would avoid dragging undefined parts if they become the input. One part drive of the feature with another part of the part relative to one another. In-context feature likely to move with the parent part. In some cases, if the assembly imported part make sense of the fixed parts in bulk rather than them. Mate them. When you're using a in-context relation, you need to take extra care to observe and ensure that the parts do not be moved around. When parts are moved around, context feature also moves obviously, and if the motion in a round circular hole in a context feature with a circular is not affecting the rotation of the reference part, that makes less difference. However, if there's a key wedge, it will make changes that you need to pay attention to the combining undefined parts of the context feature. Best practice, you should avoid in-context relation between parts with relative motion is allowed between those parts. Working in within context, multiple instances. Another situation that causes a problem with the multiple instances of the in-context part of being used assembly. In this case, like this, you need to be careful and consistent, but always use the same instance with greatly in-context relation. You can do this putting the parts into the folder, give the in-context part of the special component color. One trick will use the instance of the in-context part of the in-context relation. Second instance part of allow motion. In-context relations are tied to one specific instance of the part, regardless of how many of these parts are assembly. You may want to set a driving in-context part aside, putting it in the folder, changing its color, and hiding it. Using in-context file management. Understanding what you're doing with file management imperative to working with the parts depending on in-context feature before referencing and stored in both a part and doing reference assembly. Whether reference is created in PERS properly, change the name of the other document or either even the reference document is bound to cause problems. For example, if you rename the in-context part Windows Explorer, some of would recognize the part. This means that in-context reference won't update the part, which will show out of context symbol. Best practice use should use either Solidworks as a save as command, Solidworks Explorer to rename parts in assembly. This applies to all parts and assemblies, but even more in context documents. Using in context and mates. Extension context best practice would be completing without using warning again, mating in context features. Mating parts in context feature creates a parametric daisy chain. Establishing it in order with assembly feature the mates must be solved. This always creates a performance problem in assembly, especially large one. Solidworks performance evaluation looks condition where examining assemblies. Alright, identifying circular reference. Circular reference assembly is a bigger problem than most people might realize. In fact, that most people do not realize circular reference is a problem for the matter that they can even exist. Circular reference, taken apart from the part A, reference part B with the part reference A, creates a circular loop that really disrupts the assembly rebuild, requiring multiple rebuild parts feature the design tree. Suspectable sort of looping because of the part feature manager operates linear fashion, at least when it comes to applying relations between sketch and features. The assembly feature manager is solved in this order to very similar solve reference geometry sketch listed before parts in order to the top of the design tree. Rebuild individual parts is necessary. Solve mates and locate parts. Solve the in-context feature parts. Solve reference geometry sketch listed after the mates. Solve the assembly feature component parts. Loop step 3. Solve mates that are connected to anything that solved after the first round of mates. Continue to loop until the complete. Solidworks breaks the loop after second evaluation of the matrix to avoid an infinite loop. Any feature not rebuilt at the end of the loop will get traffic light rebuild symbol. Even if you don't have the reference such as per part A, reference B, part B, and reference part A, still possible to highly be convoluted by a not entirely circle loop. Many users with smaller assembly 100 parts complain about the very poor performance. Using skeleton layouts. By making in-context reference techniques can help avoid circular reference, always creating reference part with a higher design tree. You can expand the idea using single entity time design tree with which the in-context reference is made that could take the form of layout, sketch, and skeleton. This concept is discussed in Chapter 16, working with assembly sketches and layout, and Chapter 13, building efficient assembly. Layout features with a different layout sketch is discussed later in this chapter, an additional in-context tool. Alright, remember the layout sketch consists of a single even multiple sketches to control the over layout with the assembly with the relation between part refer all the relation single entity does not change the part configuration lose or gain filtered edges. Intra-part parametrics must be much stronger and more stable. When you're building a mold or plastic injection mold, the single sketch can control the size of the position, plate, pins, and so on. 3D parts made of the 2D sketch and the 2D sketch converted entities. Then the parts will move the sketch. The same technique is important, useful any type of die punching design, along with many other types of designs. Using in-context library parts should never contain an in-context reference, especially in-context reference out of the context. Some all library assemblies must have in-context reference between parts. Single parts should not have features created in context. External reference may be unavoidable to form mirrored and inserted part of the in-context reference are completely available. Alright, show the removing the relations. Correct way to remove the in-context sketch relation by the display delete relations. You can select the option all in the sketch selection box as shown in figure 22. If you're considering breaking relations tool, I encourage you to either reconsider the look of the relations step with simply removing all of the in-context relations together, or the types of in-context relations are not easy to remove the sketch relations when they see external reference symbol in the sketch. It could be sketch relations or it could be sketch plane that was in context. In order to remove the reference from an in-context sketch plane, you must redefine the plane locally in the part. Don't forget to edit the conditions such as up to surface, offset from surface, even from the surface. External reference remains featured with either the parent-child option with the right menu button, mouse button located. Remember the use of the edge and verticals. Plain definition can cause an in-context relation. Deciding whether to use mating or in-context. In-context initially fast and easy that it can be addictive, but you need to think before you use it because speed and file management implication relations will have a design process. Competition, communicating design intent, someone that each of the needs, someone else needs to view the model after the done will be possibly added to some of the clues help the person understand how the model works, how it's best change. For example, the descriptive feature, sketch name of the components associated with the feature, design builder, add documentation, design journal to write notes. You can even put an HTML links to the display on the graphics window. In context and intent may not always be obvious to impatient users may find it more expedient to delete in-context reference replaced with either local relations, no relations at all. More document your intent, and more likely others will be to follow it. I'm going to pause the tape right here. Alright, working with split parts. Instead of split parts, both master model technique, few techniques are discussed in Chapter 33. Some of the people include context technique with master model tools because of the way they make several parts update together. Solid split parts, sometimes called push operation, because the data is pushed for the original multi-body part, individual child parts. Split function takes a single body and splits it in several bodies. It's optional. Lead single saving bodies out of the individual parts. of the difference of this done various reasons, creating single smooth shape out of several different parts. For example, the auto body panels, various covers, buttons on computer mouses. You can use the split parts technique application as well. Sometimes this product's designed as a single solid to keep the model simple, and because it knows how the parts will be the sum of the manufacturer decisions are made. Part can be split in several models due to the engineering data is added to them. Using mirror parts, you can mirror right-handed part, creating a left-hand part. Activate mirror part command. You may select the plane or plane of your face. Choose insert mirror part to initiate mirror part command. Mirror parts can also use configuration so they have one of the mirror exactly except for the parts. You can select the configuration for the parent and the child document. Alright, your tutorial is still working in context. Follow steps to get the following working in the part of the context. Assembly, open assembly, download material, the tutorial table, solid assembly, select the colors of the you'll be used during in context editing. Remember setting control tool options, control colors or other tools option display shown in figure 2023. Set the assembly edit part color shade to blue, assembly non-edit parts to the shade of gray. Also assemble transparency for context editing, force assembly transparency slider around 90%. Notice you're already beginning. Then use the select tabletop edit component button. Assembly toolbar component is available through the both right menu mount button and drop down menu as the edit part. Right click the subassembly edit subassembly options available. Notice tabletop part with the feature manager turns turn same color. Expand the tabletop new assembly feature front plane with open a new sketch on it. Notice you can select the edge of the transparent part through transparency even if select the transparency option is selected. Tools option selection. This selection applies only to faces, not edges. Instead, change display mode of the entire assembly of the wireframe. Now select 16 whole edges of the legs. Doesn't matter whether you select the top edge of the bottom, even the combination of the top of the bottom. Use convert entities command. The project edge of the sketch plane circles is shown in figure 2024. Create the cut and that goes through all where you may have the chain with the direction true to get it to work. Leave the edit component made with the confirmation corner. Save the tutorial assembly. Open the file name tutorial machine assembly solid assembly. Notice that the tabletop part of the assembly even wireframe display state was assigned with the display pane. Right click on the part edit part list, select the part and select the edit component bar and the toolbar warning display of the part feature that were created in context and other assembly. Edit the part and you can add any of the more external reference and context features to it. Toggle off the edit component button over the assembly toolbar edit part and leave the edit part mode. 10. Choose the tools options, external reference, select the allowable multiple context marks and editing assembly option. Now try to edit the tabletop part again. If the context assembly the time warning displays, make sure your editing the tabletop part does not change the specified in tools option color setting because of the wireframe display mode, ensuring the status bar low right color displays editing part rather than editing assembly. Open the sketch front plane, convert 4 edges of the holes as shown in figure 2025. Cut the holes through all the settings and again be aware of the direction of the cuts to toggle off the edit component mode. Controls S to save the assemblies. Figure 2026 shows the final finished assembly. Open the machine base bracket part and open the window. Select the open part from the right menu about part shown in figure 2027. Select the front plane, choose insert mirror, create the new part, open the new property interface shown in 2028. In this case, solid bodies, click the green check mark icon. Notice that you insert the mirror part command property manager, insert the part with the mirror partially function, insert function, added feature of the mirror by with the after inserted. Notice all ending the transfer, and then fact with the break with the link of the original part. Note with the templated related use of the part chosen based on the tools option default templates as you the default document templates and property use the select document template. Alright, we're looking at the mirror property insert part listing. Notice the new part is included a mirrored copy of the original. See that the made in the U of the text is on the bottom backward. Fortunately, configuration active specifically for this purpose. The configuration select the mirror in the configuration name drop down external reference dialog box right menu mouse button. Select external reference. Know that the configuration moves. They extruded the text on the model after the word your own made in extruded text block. Bottom part save the part. Bottom line, although in context function powerful, seductive, you should be sparingly and particularly careful of file management issues renaming parts. Assembly, the best approach to Solidworks Explorer and save the as command with both parts and assembly is open. In context techniques include layout feature. Our pinnacle of the true parametrical practice enables you to take concept of design change it entirely in a new level. Master first step is being able to work fluently with external reference to be able to recognize, identify, edit. Select a part with the download materials of the chapter external reference skill of development in this chapter. Others to remove all the external reference, deleting, sketching, and feature. Sometimes mixing advanced techniques can lead to undesirable results. Name a couple of advanced techniques you need to be careful when combining in context. Describe the different similarities between broken reference and a frozen reference. Chapter 21, Editing, Evaluating, Troubleshooting, and Assemblies.